Hello, today is Wednesday, February 26th, and welcome to episode 419 of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast to get you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, and I'm joined by NSI Advisory Board member Lester Munson and NSI Senior Fellows Morgan Vina and Andrew Boreen. Today we're diving deep, literally, into a hidden battlefield of modern geopolitics, undersea cables. These cables carry over 95% of global internet traffic, facilitating everything from banking transactions to military communications. But recent incidents, including a Chinese crewed vessel allegedly severing a cable off Taiwan's coast, are raising alarms about vulnerabilities in this critical infrastructure. This week, Taiwan detained a Togo flag vessel, the Hongtai, which it suspects of deliberately severing an undersea cable connecting Taiwan's main island to the Penghu Islands. And authorities have called this a potential gray zone operation. Similar incidents have occurred in the Baltic Sea, where suspected Russian-linked ships damaged subsea infrastructure. NATO and European governments have ramped up security efforts to protect their networks in that region. Beyond internet access, these cables are vital for financial markets, military coordination, and intelligence sharing. Cutting them could cripple a nation's economy and military response time. Andrew, I'd like to turn first to you. Are these incidents a part of a coordinated hybrid warfare strategy, in your opinion?
I think it certainly indicates that it's perhaps more likely than not. And when you look at that Baltic Sea case, that was actually a Chinese flag vessel. That wasn't just Russia. So we do see this overlap. And I think when you talk about a lot of the media is covering this as though gray zone operations have never been done before. We have a name for this. It's existed since World War II and long before. It's called sabotage. They're acts less than warfare, but intended to disrupt really critical infrastructure. And so I think it is something that has to be looked at. And there is definitely a pattern that can be unveiled through things like saying, hey, it's a Togo flag, but it's a Chinese crew. Taiwan has actually started creating a database of Chinese shadow fleet ships. And I'll defer to the others on this, but I think this is the exact opposite of the kind of integrity of American values, like having a great white fleet that provides security on the ocean, identifying as the U.S. Navy. This is shadow warfare meant to disrupt, destabilize, and frankly, the very first cut against Taiwan in Matsu Islands put out internet for all people and businesses for 2 straight weeks. So these are really significant issues.
Morgan, I'd like to turn to you. Do you think these are part of Beijing's broader pressure campaign on Taiwan?
So I'd like to just put out here that Andrew basically took all of my talking points. So we're not going to have too many fault lines between us. I will say that this is not the first time that we have seen China messing about with undersea cables, particularly with Taiwan. Taiwan, in response to the PRC, in response to Taiwanese allegations, is basically saying, hey, this happens all the time. There are 100 incidents a year. Like, just completely denying sabotage and actually gaslighting, the Taiwanese. So I think really, and this is absolutely sabotage. This is absolutely gray zone warfare. Yes, it does happen. Accidents happen. This was not an accident, right? And I think what we're seeing too, just recently today, we saw Taiwan have to dispatch its Navy and Air Force, after China just launched live drill strikes about 40 miles off its coast. So I don't think this is any coincidence here. This is obviously a blatant provocation. With this latest incident on the live drills, there was no warning. There were 32 military aircraft with flight planes and ships. Like, China knows exactly what it's doing here. But I think for the United States, we shouldn't necessarily get bogged down in just sort of like this, Taiwan, it has to defend itself against, or China's cutting undersea cables, or is doing live drills. The United States really needs to create a deterrent here that really prevents Beijing from attempts at reunification. So we saw HFAC here, or a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing yesterday. This was a big topic. So I think what the United States really needs to do is really focusing on building that deterrent and preventing China from taking any extraordinary steps against Taiwan.
Lester, what are your thoughts? How prepared is the United States to respond to incidents like this, or even to large-scale cable sabotage?
Well, first of all, I don't actually know what our ability to respond is. I presume there's a lot of stuff in the classified sector. I assume we know way more about this than what is on the front page of the newspaper and on people's phones. But I also want to link what China is doing with respect to connections to Taiwan with what Russia is doing in Scandinavia and Northern Europe. Right? This cutting of cables technique, like cyber attacks, is something that both China and Russia are doing. Are they acting in concert? It seems to me like they're at least sharing what you might call best practices or possibly worst practices. And we need to be hyper vigilant here. And this should be a very healthy reminder that our defense budget is critically important. Our intelligence budget is critically important. Oh, by the way, having alliances with other countries who are in harm's way is also critically important. Finland is now a NATO member and is a military ally of the United States. If their cable's getting cut, that matters to us. So we need to kind of move past the current epoch of foolishness and back towards a more serious approach to national security. I hope that happens in the next few days, and we can kind of get beyond Twitter warfares and stupid Chiron headlines and some of the ridiculous Doge stuff, and get back to the stuff that actually matters for our country, like dealing with these kinds of problems and dealing with them in a serious way.
I have a fault line potentially, Martha.
Yes. Well, please share.
Yeah, and it's very unusual that mine is with Lester. I don't think there is any lack whatsoever of clear, overt tools of the president's foreign policy to address these issues. This comes down to simple willingness to act.
Yep.
And, I'm here actually in D.C. at the SANS Institute OSINT Summit the last 2 days. We've got our event on Capitol Hill with the ambassadors from Norway, from Denmark, from Estonia. Estonia has not only been taking gray zone attacks and hybrid threat to the sea cable question, but they've been getting hammered on the digital front. With the most digitized economy in the world. So that'll be a really great event on the Hill for anyone to learn about these issues and why they matter. But yeah, so I think what I want to say is, Lester, I love you, man, but I don't think this is a massive need for a foreign policy shift. It's a simple need for the executive branch and the president of the United States to say, enough. This hurts our business. This hurts our economy. You cut cables to markets that we depend upon, and whether they're allied or not, and that's bad for business. It's bad for growth. And there are naval platforms that can be sent out. We absolutely have seen ramming off of the Philippines, ramming of ships by Chinese Coast Guard naval vessels. And so, I think it comes down to, like hockey. How rough do you want to get in the corners? Do we want the puck or not?
Andrew,
yeah.
let me. I don't think there's a huge fault line between us. I know we've got tools, and I know we can.
You should be a diplomat.
I worry that we get too distracted by silly things. Right? There's talk now of kicking Canada out of the Five Eyes. What the hell is that about? That's just dumb.
They're going to start the 5 A's.
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh dear God.
Sorry.
But you see my point. Like it doesn't just require having tools in the toolbox. I'm sure we have that. It requires a carpenter willing to use them in the proper way. And we've got to stop focusing on what the paint color is on the porch and instead worry about the foundation and whether we're protecting the building here, if I can use that metaphor. So I agree with you, but I also think we need real focus and seriousness from our top policymakers, particularly in the executive branch, you people, if you're listening. Let's get with the program and start dealing with stuff that matters.
Morgan, would you like to say, put in a final word?
Well, I just think, I'd just like to point out that, Les and Andrew have basically come around to what my point was, which was two guns. So,
Morgan, I love you. I listen to you all the time on this podcast. We almost are always in uniform alignment. So I don't know if we can designate can we find a fault line on the response options, right? I wrote a piece for the Skiff a while back after the Baltic cut, and the 4 big recommendations, and this was based off conversations I've had with Albanians, not on sea cables, but they got hit by Iranian cyber attacks for sheltering the MEK, right? So this gray zone hybrid warfare environment is real. It's not like this just showed up yesterday. But things like real-time monitoring, where's the willingness? What are we doing on that front to expose the activity? And that way, the public or Congress or others that need to resource the willingness to act can be behind the actions. And it doesn't just look like it's a shadow. We don't need to play shadow warfare to win shadow warfare is what I'm getting at. And then the other, one of the other big ones was civil military collaboration and public-private partnerships. And I don't know how well we're doing on that front because in the free world, we have to have a willing, voluntary private sector work with the government. China does not have to do that. You see it through all the ByteDance activity. You see it through the use of these Togo flagged vessels that they, get a Togo flag. So we're not a Chinese crew, but they are. And so I don't know if that creates any fault line with the two of you, but I think there are a lot of really simple fixes. And I don't know if the two of you see it as more complex.
I don't have a fault line there. I think, but what I would like to see from this administration in particular, where they've kind of thrown out to some extent the old model of doing business. What's your new model solution here? Are you going to demonstrate something in the real world that shows your effectiveness when China and Russia are doing bad things like this? Are you going to push? How are you pushing back? What's your answer? I want to know what that is so that we can start building expectations appropriately and kind of marshal people and resources in the way we need to, instead of kind of this, again, I go back to my original point, like this focus on things that don't really matter, like, tariffing and sanctioning Canada, for God's sake, which is ridiculous. Let's focus on the stuff that actually does matter. Let's see what you've got, what kind of solutions you've got. I think I'd be very interested to know what they are. I think some of them might be pretty good. Can we fight back in specific ways that sends a real clear message to these guys that you don't screw around with us?
Yeah, I'll just chime in here too and saying that, look, I think what we're seeing with, Trump's tariffs on China right now, this is just sort of the opening salvo, right? This is just the start. Trump's been in office, like a month? So, and it's been a very busy month for what it's worth.
Long month.
But with that said, though, I mean, Trump's real China hawks aren't necessarily in place yet. Bridge Colby, he's been nominated, but hasn't been confirmed yet. So I actually expect, like, once he's actually in place, I suspect we'll start to see more of a China policy emerge. But I think right now they've got a long way to go in terms of actually providing, as I said before, that deterrence, to actually demonstrating to China that, we're not going to mess about and that they need to stop with the malign activity with our partners.
God damn, we can't find a fault line for our life, Martha.
We all want to protect the cables.
I don't, this is obviously not just a technology issue. It's a national security crisis in the making.
Yep.
China and Russia are testing Western response thresholds. And so if we leave it unchecked, they will just become more emboldened and engage in more aggressive tactics against us. So we and our allies, we need a comprehensive defense strategy. We actually need a strong military, a strong Navy. We also need to be invested in emerging technologies that can help monitor and respond to these incidents. And so, I think that probably encapsulates what everyone's been saying on the podcast today. We need to keep pressure on them, and hopefully when all the folks are in the roles that they've been nominated for, we will see more action. On that note, given our timing, I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much to Kelly Crowley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for the help in producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, February 28th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the NSI's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Follow us on your favorite podcast app and find us on YouTube for a video of today's episode.
So you can see our ugly faces. No, I'm just kidding. We have beautiful faces and two ugly faces. The two ugly ones are me and Lester. So,
Oh, come on.
I'm sorry, one ugly face.
Watch
All
the
right.
course
We're
and
all
you can
beautiful.
decide for yourself.
There you go. Decide for yourself. Hey, we give you the information. You make the decision. You decide, America. America, you decide. All right. Thank you,
Thank
everybody. I'll see
you.
you all tomorrow, I hope.
Yes, that's right. Bye-bye.